Have you just bought a new bike, either online or from a shop, and you need to set it up? Then this video might be for you. Here's 8 tips for setting up your new road bike.
Getting cockpit set up can be pretty straightforward. There are a lot of bikes that come out of the box with, in my opinion, the controls set up in the wrong location on the handlebar. So we're going to show you a really easy way of setting up the handlebar so that it's optimally laid out for you to reach the handlebars and the controls. Start off, loosen the stem bolts on the front of the bike. This is obviously a jig. And what we're going to try and do is start off with, and this is a generalization, but it'll work for most handlebar types. We want to get the end of the handlebar flat on the end, looking at this bubble here. This is the starting point to start offsetting the reach of the handlebar, because it can add quite a lot of unnecessary reach to the front of the bicycle. So we're going to get that completely level. Once you set your handlebar rotation, what we're probably going to need to do is unwrap the top of the handlebars. I don't have to do that in this case, but we're going to unwrap all the way along the bottom, all the way across the tops, right to underneath the hood, and we're then going to peel the hood back. This is the case for most Shimano, most SRAM shifters. Peel the hood back, take a 5mm Allen key. It's easier with a P handle like this rather than a multi-tool, and you're just going to loosen it off and get that control so that there's a slight element of personal preference. I personally tend to like them just slightly elevated from completely level, on the grounds that when you present your hand to the lever, you're not having to roll the wrist and rotate the wrist like so. So we're going to get that nice and high. Now what that does is has the potential to reduce the reach, which is a major driver for discomfort and pain in cycling, by up to 25-30mm without you having to change anything. I find myself having to do this particularly on the Trek branded bikes. A lot of the time they come with what's called a VRC handlebar. It's a very long reach handlebar. It's got a nice shape in my opinion, but it does have quite a long reach, and the hoods are set up quite a lot lower than I would like. So if you've got a Trek, then it's probably worth having a look at that. Ultimately, it's going to make it a lot more comfortable for you.
Next one is a really useful tip. It's completely free. Most levers have reach adjustment for the brake levers. So if you have small hands, you might want to adjust this. If you have big hands, you might want to adjust this. For these Shimano shifters, you've got to peel back this to access the bolt, which is right on the top here. You put your Allen key in the top and wind it in. As you can see, the lever moves closer to the bar. That means you can reach it more easily when you're in the drops or on the hoods. Depending on what levers that you have, this bolt can be in lots of different places. So if you Google Shimano Tiagra lever reach adjustment, you should be able to find where the bolts are on each one. It's worth noting that if you're using rim brakes with cables, you'll need to readjust the caliper after making this adjustment based on how much you've wound it in. Usually it's just a barrel adjuster. Should be an easy enough job. Get your saddle level. You can do this in a couple of different ways. First, by eye. So put your bike up against a wall, or if you have a wall like that, you can line it up against the drawers. Most saddles are designed to work flat or with a tiny bit of nose down tilt. So as a starting point, you want to get it as close to that as possible. If your saddle looks like this, which is a very common type of saddle with a pressure relief channel in the middle there and a little bit of a curve, you want to aim for the middle point to be level. Like I said, you can either do this by eye, or you can get a spirit level and something flat and find out that it's not that level. Oh, bang on. If your new bike has come with a flat saddle, you can put a spirit level straight on it because it's flat, and just make sure it's set up completely level. Most pedals have an adjustment on them that allows you to change the tension. So if you're new to the sport and you're not used to clipping in, loosening this off can be a really good idea. Equally, if you are racing and you really don't want to risk unclipping, I do it on my mountain bike all the time, I crank them up quite high because I don't want to pull my feet out. Usually it's a 2.5mm Allen key in this case, and you can wind and adjust it. You'll probably hear it clicking. All it does is adjust the tension on the spring that's in the pedal, and yeah, job's good.
Making sure your quick releases are tight can be a pretty critical way of avoiding injury when you're riding your bike. Now, most bikes will come with the wheels already in the frame, but if you have to fit the wheels to the bike when the bike's been delivered, then this might be something you want to check. Secondly, it's actually worth noting that over time the quick releases will get softer anyway, so you'll need to continue checking that they're tight. Most quick releases will have an open, it will be denoted on the lever whether it's open or closed. Most of them are cam actuated as well. When you close the lever, it should leave a light imprint in your hand. That tends to signify that you've got enough pressure through the through the closure. The way of adjusting it is there is at the opposite end of the cam, there's a female nut on the end of it. We're going to turn that barrel slightly to increase the amount of tension that's going to be applied through the lever, and that will yield a firmer grip in the dropouts of the wheel. It's worth noting that when you are doing these up, you need to make sure that the bike is inevitably, you're not going to have the bike in a stand, you're going to have it on the floor like we've got it here. It's important to understand that you don't want the bike at an angle when you're closing these levers, because what will happen is it will lock the wheel in place at an angle, which means your gears won't work properly, neither will your brakes. So make sure that the bike is completely vertical, and also where you close the lever down should generally be orientated like this. Don't close it up against the frame like so, because you won't be able to get a good enough purchase in order to open it. I would tend to always go between the seat and the chainstays. The anatomy of a quick release skewer. How riveting is this? In some rare cases you might find that the quick release skewers won't even be fitted to the wheels, so you might find them in this kind of form. Now it's worth noting that there are some little springs in the quick release. Now they're basically intended and designed to pull the cam and the female part of the skewer away from the frame to enable the wheel to drop out of the bike. You've just got to make sure that these are always the thinnest part against the frame or against the wheel. What happens is if you put them in the wrong way round, it will yield a wheel that won't actually sit in the dropouts correctly. So again, your wheel will either be off center or it'll be sat at an angle, which, as we mentioned earlier, will have ramifications in your gear and braking systems. In modern years, we've seen the advent of bikes coming with disc brakes. What that's meant is that they're now mostly coming with through axles. Now the benefit of a through axle is you can't really get it wrong. You won't be able to fit the axle correctly if the wheel isn't in the frame correctly. It's comprised of only one component. You essentially have a thread in the frame, usually on the drive side. So there's your through axle. It's one, like I say, it's one piece, it's one axle, it goes inside the frame, and as I said, if the frame is out of alignment, you won't be able to get it in, but if it is, it'll be fine.
Also worth noting, some of them have Allen keys on the end to adjust them, and some of them it's just a lever that you can physically pull. To be fair, the Allen key thing is more of a racing feature and seen on higher end bikes. Most consumer and gravel bikes will have a lever, which is a little bit more practical. Pinch punches are caused when you hit a bump while riding and the inner tube and the tyre hit the rim and then cause it to puncture. Usually this will only happen if you're running to lower pressures. So you want to make sure your tyres are hard. If you don't have a pump with a pressure gauge on it, then it may just be a case of feeling them. If you do have a pump with a pressure gauge on it, then you can check the side of the tyre and you'll be able to see the suggested pressures for that tyre there. Currently this one has no pressure in it.
Make sure your headset's tight. Now, for the purpose of this argument, most headsets are more or less the same with more modern, even with more modern aero bikes. So what we're doing is preloading the bearings that are in the top and bottom cups of the headset. It basically kind of pulls everything together. Something we found quite a lot after we were kind of removing stems and what have you, is that usually the bung that's set inside the steerer, which is the tube, which is part of the fork, hasn't been tightened correctly. We're going to show you how to do that later on. But the way that this works is you always need to make sure that your stem bolts are loose before you start adjusting the top cap. By loosening or tightening this top bolt, you're basically pulling the bearings together and preloading them. We don't want it really, really tight. You just want to do it finger tight, so that there isn't any play. So if I back this off, we might see a bit of play. You can see that there's some play in the headset now, and that will usually manifest itself as backwards and forwards motion. One way of checking for it is if you apply the front brake when the bike's on the floor and rock it backwards and forwards, you shouldn't really feel any movement. It's worth noting that some bikes applied with disc brakes, you might feel a little bit of movement, but usually with headsets it's pretty obvious. So the way of removing that movement, as I said, is get your 5mm, tighten that up. Like I say, you've only got to nip it up a little bit. There isn't really a torque setting for it because it varies from headset to headset. And then obviously you're going to make sure that it's straight and tighten your stem bolts. To give you an understanding of what's inside here is This is from a Cannondale. Historically, there's what was fitted was called a star-fangled nut, which was basically a steel insert with a thread cut into it that you would hammer into the steerer tube. With the advent of carbon fiber steerer tubes, we've started using these expanding bungs. The way that these work is that as you apply, as you tighten it, it expands the bung inside the steerer. What I find a lot of the time is that these have been fitted, but they haven't actually been tightened correctly. What that means is that the headset works loose over time. So what you need to do in that case, and I know I told you not to do this a minute ago, but for the sake of showing you, I'm just going to take this top cap off. We usually have inside there a 6 or an 8mm Allen key. Looks like an 8. It is. And all you got to do is, you might need to hold the wheel, is just give it a little tighten. So you don't want the thing moving inside the steerer. Equally, it's also worth knowing that this should never sit proud of the top of the steerer. This is actually what you can see here is part of the fork. So the part that you're screwing the top cap into should never sit proud of the steerer.
And then
it leads us to our next point. Before you tighten everything up, you probably ought to use a torque wrench. You can buy one of these. It's up for about £30. We've got this posh Park Tool one, which basically stops you from over tightening everything. So most stem bolts are preset at 5 Newton meters. This will not allow you to go beyond that, which stops you from A, stripping the threads, B, breaking bolts, and C, most importantly, not cracking the steerer because it's made of carbon fiber. This is a really useful tool for everything actually, or most parts of the bike. I believe you can get them with interchangeable heads. This one has a 4mm on it at the moment, and you can go around and nut and bolt check all the bolts on your bike. They come in lots of different guises. This is a pretty basic one, which has sort of resistance built into it, or you can go right the way up to like a pro grade digital system, which is what we use in the workshop here, but they all do the same thing fundamentally.
That marks the end of this video. I hope those 8 tips were useful for you. If you've got a brand new bike, enjoy it. Big thanks to James for helping me out with this one. I'll put a link down below in the description. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section down below. Thank you, and see you next time.